Dry suits. Whether you're diving in cold water or you just want to maybe stay dry while diving in general, dry suits are something that a lot of divers invest in at some point in their diving career, whether it's from the very beginning because cold water is all that they have around them, or as they want to extend the dive season a bit more and be able to dive all year round regardless of their local weather. Dry suits can be pretty expensive, and this is mostly because the majority of them are actually custom fit and made for you. This means that you actually have to go get measured somewhere and get your exact measurements sent into the manufacturer, or more recently, some of the manufacturers actually have apps where you literally do like a body scan type thing or have someone take a video or photo of you, and the app will scan you, get all of your measurements, and then they actually manufacture a dry suit exactly for you with all the custom fittings you want and everything. It sounds great, but again, it can get pretty expensive, and then you're also stuck waiting months, sometimes many months or even almost a year for this dry suit to come from the manufacturer and get to you. It all depends on their production time and their back orders and things like that, but usually it's at least multiple months, if not 6 months plus, to be able to get a dry suit sent to you. However, with all of that said, there are alternative options out there that can be a lot cheaper, and that's going to be in the form of off the rack. So rather than being fully custom, these off the rack ones come in standard sizes, usually 6, 7, 8 different size options for you. And if it does fit you off the rack without needing any customization at all, then you are in luck and you can actually save a lot of money for yourself by having a dry suit that is very close to perfect, or sometimes if you get really lucky, perfectly fit for your body shape and size and all of that. In this video, I'll go over 2 of the most popular off-the-rack dry suits out there. The Hollis DX-300X, which is my personal dry suit, and the Apeks Thermiq Advanecd Dry, which is my friend's dry suit. Let's get into it. I'm Thomas Hughes, a professional scuba instructor, and to start with, let me just say that this is not going to be a video for the complete guide to dry suits. I'll do a brief introduction of the different types of dry suits out there. I'll talk about some of the different materials that they can be made from, some of the different undergarments as well, but I'm not going to be going in depth all about dry suits in this video. If you want something like that, let me know in the comments down below. I'll see what information I could put together for you and make a more comprehensive intro to dry suits. For this one specifically, I wanted to compare the features of these 2 dry suits because they are both off the rack, which again, I'll talk about that a little bit more. And they're, again, pretty popular as well. One that I dive myself and then one that my friend dives all the time. Both the Hollis DX300X and the Apeks Thermiq Advanecd Dry are shell suits or tri-laminate suits that are off the rack, right? So you need to pick your size and be able to go from there. They're also both self-donning with the cross-shoulder zipper on it, so you can actually put it on yourself, zip it up entirely by yourself as well. They both come with a whole lot of features and make them, again, 2 of the most popular off-the-rack dry suits that are out there on the market today. So let's go ahead and talk about what those features are, what's in common between the 2, what makes them stand out from each other, and then just a little bit of insight on how you might want to decide if you were going to purchase one of these yourself. So first of all, like I mentioned, these are both off-the-rack dry suits, and for people that line up pretty well with the actual sizing charts that come from Hollis and Apeks respectively, you can really luck out with a huge cost savings and a great dry suit that's going to have so many extra features that you normally have to pay even more for, and it fits you just fine. Zach, for example, who's wearing the Apeks dry suit, he actually fits his almost perfectly with the sizing chart, where for me, I have a little bit of extra baggage in the torso and a little bit of extra length there that luckily can be adjusted within the suit itself, but does make for a little bit of long arms and a little bit long torso, and it doesn't fit me exactly right, but it's pretty close and good enough for my needs for now. Now, both of these dry suits are pretty much marketed to the same type of diver. They're both fairly fitted cuts. They are made for the tech diver with the tech diver in mind. They have cargo pockets that are down on the thighs, though they're slightly different in position, which we'll talk about that in the next section here. They also have things like, their typical shoulder vent and the chest inflator that's there as well, though again, some differences there. They both have the typical suspenders that you'll see inside a dry suit, so you can just step in, throw those suspenders on, and then using the telescopic torso that allows for a little bit of adjustment and variance in your height and things like that, you can just pull it up, self-don it, and then use the crotch strap to hook up and kind of pull that extra slack in from the telescopic torso piece. Being self-donning, they both have YKK waterproof zippers that allow you to go from the shoulder down to the hip. So again, allows you to self-don it there for you, though there are a few differences in the zipper that I'll talk about in just a moment as well. Those cargo pockets down on the thigh can actually be expanded as well in kind of an accordion style in a sense, though again, there are some differences with the pockets as well that we'll talk about. Then they both also use SI Tech or Sci-Tech, whichever way you want to say it, neck and glove silicone seals. So there are some differences there, but the neck seal and the glove seals are Sci-Tech systems. Finally, they both come with 5mm neoprene socks, not booties, that are built into the suit itself. So you will need to pick up your own rock boots or dry suit boots if you'd like. Again, like many things when it comes to this type of diving, you don't necessarily need to buy diving specific boots. I use Chuck Converse, for example, and they work perfectly fine. Now, these neoprene socks do have a few minor differences like many of the other features I talked about here. So let's go ahead and just jump into the differences now instead, and we'll start comparing these two suits and see what stands out, because at face level, they seem pretty much the same. Now, like I said, they are really similar suits, but these are really minute details that kind of matter as you actually wear the suit and use it for a while, and might make you change your opinion on which one you actually buy. So let's dive into those details a bit, right? For example, I mentioned that both the Apeks and the Hollis suit have the SI Tech or Sci-Tech silicone neck seal, right? And they also have the wrist seals as well that we'll talk about in just a second here. But on the Apeks suit itself, there's actually also a neoprene neck gaiter that goes across there. And that's just gonna keep your neck a little bit more warm. So something that can happen when diving in a dry suit is you have that silicone seal sitting there, and when the water touches that area still gets cold, right? Neoprene gaiter helps kind of keep that seal a little bit warmer for you. It also gives you an area to tuck your hood into. So if you're wearing a hood while dry suit diving, like many of us will, and you got a little bit of a bib there that you need to tuck in, it gives you a spot to tuck it in, which is kind of a nice thing to have. The Hollis doesn't have that. Now, talking about the wrist seals as well, again, they're silicone and they are from SI Tech. However, the Hollis is using Sci-Tech round quick cuffs, and the Apeks is actually using oval rings instead. At a glance, this isn't really a huge difference, but it's something to consider as well. The oval rings can be a little bit lower profile, so sometimes they're a little bit harder to don the gloves that way, or don the wrist seal, I guess, in that sense. But being a little bit lower profile, if you think about an oval, it's going to be more the shape of your hand. And if you're on something like a DPV or a scooter, basically, that round side of things might catch a little bit more water in your sleeve, where the oval is, I guess, a little bit less drag and might not catch as much water. So that's one thing to think about there. Now, on the other hand, the round quick cuffs are a little bit more common of a system that many other dry suits use as well. And because of this, you might have a little bit of an easier time finding things like dry suit gloves to go into that quick cuff system, because the round design is just a little bit more common. Being rounded, there's also a little bit more room in that cuff itself, so it's a little bit easier to take on and take off. Now, speaking of these Sci-Tech or SI-Tech seals, the Hollis suit actually also uses SI-Tech for the valve. So the dump valve and the chest inflator valve, those are by Sci-Tech or SI-Tech. Apeks, on the other hand, decided to go a proprietary route in this case. So they have a proprietary Apeks dump valve and a proprietary inflator on the chest as well. This isn't a huge deal by any means, but it does mean that getting replacement parts means that you have to go to Apeks directly for their proprietary side, where the Sci-Tech ones, Sci-Tech makes stuff for a whole bunch of different brands and a lot of different suits. So it might be a little bit easier to source replacement parts, and if you need someone to work on it, you might have a better chance finding someone that works on Sci-Tech versus trying to find someone specifically for Apeks. There's not that much difference in the design as far as I'm concerned, so it might not be that big of a deal, but it's something to call out either way. Now, taking a little bit of a step back and just kind of looking at the suits overall from head to toe, the Apeks suit itself is actually made of a slightly different material than the Hollis one. The Hollis Trilam is this kind of like Cordura ripstop thread all over the entire suit. Basically everywhere, whether it's a high wear and tear area or not, you're gonna have that ripstop high durability fabric. But on the Apeks one, they actually reinforce the areas that are high wear and tear, and the areas that don't have as much wear and tear, let's say like the inside of the armpits or joints or something like that, those have a little bit of a lighter weight material. So this doesn't make the suit less durable necessarily, it's just that they've reinforced the areas that need to be reinforced, and they didn't reinforce the areas that don't need to be reinforced. Now, the cool thing about that extra durability is that actually goes all the way down to the neoprene socks as well. On the Hollis Drysuit, its neoprene socks are just like normal neoprene socks. It's neoprene all the way around without anything special to it. You have to kind of be careful depending on how much you're walking around and what the surfaces you're walking on, because you really don't want to tear a hole in that by accident. Neoprene's not necessarily the most durable stuff when you start kind of, scraping on it as you're walking with your foot, right? On the Apeks side of things, I still wouldn't be walking around too crazily or anything like that, but they did actually kind of texture the bottom of the neoprene socks just a little bit, almost like those socks you would see in a hospital or something like that give you a little bit of extra grip. So you aren't necessarily walking just on the neoprene. You have that tiny bit of texture there that adds just a little bit of reinforcement in case you have to do some stepping around until you get to your actual boots and are able to put those on as well. Now, talking about this extra reinforcement, I do think it's important to call out that there is a cheaper version of the Apeks suit that we're talking about. So, for this video, we're going over the Apeks Thermiq Dry Advanced, but there is a Apeks Thermiq Dry that doesn't have that extra reinforcement all over on the bottom of the socks and that extra layer of material and the high wear and tear and that sort of thing. And you get to lose all of that to also save quite a bit on the cost. It actually puts it more in line with the Hollis Drysuit price. Otherwise, the Apeks is quite a bit more expensive. At the time of this video, the Hollis DX300X is about $2,400 US, where the Apeks Thermiq Dry Advanced is $2,750. Now, the Apeks Thermiq Dry, not the advanced version, so the less reinforced one, is $2,350. So basically, you're saving yourself about $400 between the two models on Apeks, or if you go with the Hollis versus the advanced Dry, you're saving about $350. We can talk a little bit more about the value for the money in just a moment here, but let's talk about a few more differences as well. I mentioned that both suits have those nice YKK zippers, which is true. However, the Hollis suit has a really nice Velcro flap that covers the internal plastic zipper, just to help kind of protect that zipper and keep dust out and things like that. The problem with that, of course, is that Velcro wears out over time, and who knows if stuff gets in that Velcro and everything. It's not easy to clean out all the time, so it might not be able to be as sticky with a lot of extended use. It might last you a very long time before that happens, but it is something to think about. The Apeks suit, by comparison, has a second zipper, that's the external zipper, that crosses down instead, and that's to protect that internal zipper instead. So rather than a flap, you just have a second zipper there. Might be slightly less comfortable, however, it might be a little bit more durable long-term compared to the Velcro, just depending on how you see it. Now, interestingly enough, it seems like the zipper length is actually the same between both suits, but they actually start in slightly different locations, which means that they end slightly differently as well. On the Apeks suit, it actually starts a little bit over the back of the shoulder, and it comes down to just in front of your hip, where on the Hollis suit, it starts kind of closer to the front of your shoulder, but then ends slightly around the side of your hip because that extra length has to go somewhere, right? And this makes a little bit of a difference. So on the Apeks suit, my friend Zach, again, sometimes actually can't get that zipper started. I think it's on this side actually, can't actually get that zipper started by himself. He has to reach back there a little bit further than what's comfortable sometimes, and he might need to have just that first, 6 inches or so pulled to get that started, and then he can self-don it the rest of the way. And with it ending in front of his hip, he can go down and look down and make sure that it's closed by really tugging it and seeing visually that it's closed. On my Hollis suit, by comparison, I have no problem at all reaching the front of my shoulder, so I can grab that zipper, close it, but then I'm closing it down around the side of my hip. And that usually means I have to pull the material around some and kind of look and say, okay, yep, it's closed all the way. Or I ask a buddy, hey, can you just double check that this is closed all the way? I feel down there with my fingers thumb and say, yep, okay, it's good. I close that Velcro flap and I'll be good to go. Now, getting into some of the more finer details, the Hollis has these nice big thick stripes on the arms itself that are reflective, where the Apeks suit just uses an Apeks logo that is also reflective, but might not be as visible as like the big thick 3M stripe down the side of the arm. Again, your mileage may vary or just preference on that as well, but it's nice to have those nice reflective strips, in my opinion, on the Hollis suit. Taking a look down at the cargo pockets itself, the Hollis suit has a nice stainless steel D-ring inside of it that you can clip things off to, which I really like personally. Some people don't like that design though, and on the Apeks design instead, there's actually bungee instead, and those bungee loops can have things again clipped off to if needed. Some people would like to do that and then just kind of dump their pocket, get what they need, put the rest into it. Just a slight difference in design. You can definitely run bungee through pockets usually regardless. It's not too big of a deal, but it's something that you might want to consider as well. The Apeks pocket actually has a really nice little zipper on the outside as well. It's this tiny little zipper, and it's just a small little pocket for like putting cookies in for like cave diving, for example, or just when you're running a line, you need to put a cookie on the line. You might be able to fit something really small on there, like a small tool or something like that too. It's not a very big pocket, but something that you can put your cookies in, and it's just kind of a nice thing to have there. The other nice addition is on the outside flap of the Hollis. It's just a flat fabric that goes down there. It's just the same tri-layer material that covers and velcros down. But on the Apeks suit, that velcro actually has right at the edge of the seam a little bit of a foam bar. I don't want to say bar, it's soft, but it's a hard foam tube, I guess that you'd call it. And it gives you just something to kind of grab onto, which is nice if you're wearing gloves, especially, which in a dry suit, you're probably wearing gloves, so you have a little bit less dexterity. And having that little thing on the edge of the pocket flap just gives you something to hold onto when you rip that pocket open to get into it. The Apeks suit does come with a carrying case to carry your dry suit around. Personally, I use a IKEA bag, or an IKEA bag, I guess, and that works perfectly fine for me. Dry suit bags can range in prices. You can get ones from Hollis directly, and they actually run sales pretty often as well, where they include a dry suit bag and sometimes even undergarments when you purchase the DX300X. So just see what's out there for different sales in your local dive shop, or if you're shopping online, just kind of see what they have there for you. Recommend going to your dive shop if you can. That said, taking a look at all these differences and everything like that, how do we actually make our decision now? Well, honestly, these are very similar suits, and I can kind of go through where I see the pros and cons and how I made my decision, but overall, I don't think you're going to be wrong picking either of these suits if you do fit the right measurements for the off-the-rack status that they have. For me, first and foremost, I don't dive dry all that often. I do dive all year, and I'm actually teaching a class next weekend in about 5 days from the time of recording this video. And I think by the time it goes up, it'll be that Saturday and Sunday. And that class is going to be taught in 57 degrees Fahrenheit water, so I'll be diving dry for that. I taught a class in January that was like 43 or 44 degrees Fahrenheit. So I mean, definitely cold water during the winter time, but we also don't run very many classes during the winter time here. So that said, the price was actually a factor for me too. I didn't want to spend too much money on something that I wasn't going to use all the time. I did really want something nice and comfortable for me, and luckily I fit very well into one of the Hollis sizes. Again, there's slight differences. I have a little extra bulk in the arms and things like that, but it's not so terrible that it's not usable or not diveable for my use cases that I'm currently using it in. Because I don't use it that often, I was also worried slightly about maintenance, just because if something sits for most of the year, I might need to replace something if it does dry out or something like that. So having the easily replaceable silicone seals in both of these suits was great. That said, the Apeks suit does have some pros that I really like as well. The Hollis suit, I guess, has that Velcro flap that's never going to get stuck, where like a zipper can get a little bit jammed. You might need to lube it up and things like that. But zippers sometimes last a lot longer than Velcro when you think about like dirt and debris and crud getting stuck into that Velcro, or just that Velcro wearing out over time if you continually open and close that flap every single time you get in or out of the suit. The Apeks pockets are also really nice. Again, I really love that little foam handle to rip open the pockets, and I really like the cookie pocket as well. Even though I don't specifically need it right now because I'm not currently a cave diver and I don't do too much with cookies, it's something that is a really nice thing to have. The other thing I really like about that Apeks is that neck gaiter. I don't think it's necessarily worth the $350 price difference, though maybe at this price $350 isn't too crazy, considering you also get a dive bag with it, or a dry suit dive bag, I should say. But that neck gaiter is really nice to be able to tuck your hood into and just kind of keep that tucked and nice and neat, and just staying more streamlined that way. It also is just a little bit warmer around the neck, which is always a nice thing too. Again, I own the Hollis suit, so I don't personally see a difference in that $350 for me to put that money out for the extra features that the Apeks has, but maybe you will, and it might not be that big of a deal for you. I'm a little bit biased, but I still think that the Hollis suit is perfectly fine as it is, and it even has some benefits that the Apeks doesn't have, where the few things the Apeks has in return maybe isn't worth it to me, personally at least. Since the prices are fairly close to each other, about 10% difference, or well, I guess about 15% difference maybe is a better option for you. I would really just go with what's going to fit you best, because you're going to be wearing the suit and you need to be comfortable in it. So if one of them fits you better size-wise on the sizing chart, that's the one you should go with. Even if it is going to be a little bit more expensive or a little bit less expensive, that's probably the better one for you. You're probably going to be happier with the suit in the long run. Now, once you go ahead and pick a dry suit, let's say you picked up one of these, make sure you go get certified if you haven't yet, because you definitely want to learn how to dive a dry suit properly. Just like you do with any new piece of kit, you should definitely start slowly expanding back into the type of diving you've been doing, so kind of act like an initial open water student. Maybe don't go super deep right away until you get used to using that chest inflator, being used to how to bail out if you do get if you do get air into your feet, being able to do like a tuck and roll type thing, or what you need to do so you don't get stuck inverted at the surface with your feet bobbing, and just kind of learning to dive all all over again with that dry suit now. For me personally, I noticed that my buoyancy changed quite a bit. I had to get used to that because I had kind of air in my whole suit, and I had to make sure it was even and it wasn't getting stuck in different places. And I also used a lot more air, not just because I was venting my suit and then, you know, putting more air into my suit and stuff too, which is a little bit of air, but it's just a lot more work moving a whole dry suit around. You get a lot more drag sometimes and things like that. So you're going to notice air consumption changes and buoyancy changes when you're diving it. That said, I do promise that if you dive it often enough, that air consumption difference and buoyancy difference will just be like anything else, and it'll kind of normalize again, and you'll get back to where you are before you started diving that dry suit in most cases, or close to it on the air consumption side, as long as you're following like those best practices and tips for good buoyancy control, good air consumption. Now, if you do struggle with your air consumption a bit, even before putting a dry suit on, then I actually have a video that I put together for you that you can click right now. It goes over air consumption tips for all divers, not just dry suit divers. So click or tap the screen now to check that out. And with that, stay safe, have fun, and let's go diving.